We're saving the best for last as far as the post-mortem of the 49ers loss to the Bengals, because this is the most forward-facing topic as well. Steve Wilks, the embattled 49ers defensive coordinator, still their new defensive coordinator, but it has not gone well so far for the 49ers defense under a veteran coach, the first outside coordinator that Kyle Shanahan has hired. And I've found Kyle Shanahan's comments in responses to questions about Steve Wilks over the past 2 days to be very, very interesting, because twice Kyle Shanahan has had a chance to express full confidence in Steve Wilks, and twice Kyle Shanahan has not done that. So what might be next? Well, I think that we know what might be next is Kyle Shanahan's going to have a tough conversation with Steve Wilks. I mean, Kyle Shanahan essentially confirmed that today. He said that there's going to be a talk between just both of them. And there's a need for a talk right now because the 49ers defense is playing at bottom barrel level. The coverage combinations aren't right. The pass rush doesn't seem fully right. Richard Sherman today on his podcast was saying that the 49ers are playing too much man coverage on first and second down. He said that the pass rush doesn't look the same as it did before. And Richard Sherman knows this 49ers defense really well. He played for it. He's studied it. He knows his ball. And he thinks that Steve Wilks has changed a lot. And he thinks that's why the 49ers are struggling. Here are the facts starting from the base level. The 49ers have dropped from number 2 in run defense last season to number 26. This was the first alarm bell about the defense this year. I sounded this one, I think, after the Rams game back in week 2. But I said, okay, it might be a fluke. The 49ers struggled in the first half against the Rams as far as run defense went. And they tightened it up in the second half. We had seen actually that happen before. We had seen that happen in that NFC Championship game against LA. The Rams were able to run with Cam Akers in the first half, and then the 49ers tightened it up. So I didn't want to read too much into it. But then the 49ers played Arizona, and they gave up over 100 yards rushing. And I get it. Arizona had a nice power rushing attack with James Conner. They had tormented the Dallas Cowboys, but teams in the past didn't run successfully against the 49ers. They were the number 1 run defense, the 49ers were in 2021, the number 2 run defense in 2022. So they're coming off of 2 straight top 2 finishes. And all of a sudden, teams are running with some success against them. We forgot about the problems for a week when the Dallas Cowboys came to town and the 49ers completely snuffed them out. But then the ugly side of this defense really reared its ugly head in week 6 in Cleveland. The Cleveland Browns, without a serious threat at quarterback, were able to rush for 160 yards against the 49ers. And that was a huge reason why Cleveland controlled game flow on that afternoon and handed the 49ers their first loss. Then moving to Minnesota, the 49ers, very first play after they didn't do well against the run, which was unusual against the Cleveland Browns, very first play, they gave up 22 yards to Alexander Mattison around the edge. Set the tone against Minnesota, and it wasn't a good one. They tightened up toward the end, the 49ers did, but they still gave up too many rushing yards. And then it was absolutely ghastly for a third straight week against Cincinnati. Cincinnati averaged 7.2 yards per carry over the first half, and that means the 49ers have now dropped to number 26 in run defense. This is Ben Baldwin's site. This has the 49ers EPA per play defensive rank. They've dropped from number 1 to number 10 in just total defense, but that's including their better start in pass defense. That they've seen a several spot drop here just over the past couple of weeks. But if we sort this by run defense, we will find the 49ers way down here at number 26. Extremely alarming, since this is very, very different from where they were last year or the year before that. They were in these top 2 spots. Now the 49ers are down here in run defense. The 49ers are also the number 30 defense in EPA per play over the past 2 weeks. So I thought they started well, obviously, in Pittsburgh, but especially here over the last 2 weeks, it has gotten downright ugly. 661 passing yards combined between Kirk Cousins and Joe Burrow. The running games for both the Vikings and the Cincinnati Bengals have been very effective against the 49ers. Same thing with the Cleveland Browns 3 weeks ago. So it's all led us to this. Shanahan's big conversation with Steve Wilks, because there's a whole heck of a lot of doubt about this 49ers defense right now, as there should be. And it's been really, really interesting. First, after the game yesterday, I'll make this a little bit bigger so you can read it, but I'm going to read it to you because I understand that it could be hard for some of you watching on your phone screens. Kyle Shanahan was asked, speaking of your staff, what's your level of support or confidence in Steve Wilks right now? A clear opportunity, if Kyle Shanahan wanted to take it, to say that he has confidence in Steve Wilks right now. Well, here's Kyle Shanahan's press conference answer. Quote, "This isn't on any one coach or any one side of the ball. We haven't scored over 20 points here in 3 weeks too. So I think our defense needs to do better. I think our offense needs to do better. I think our team needs to do better." And when I say our team, I mean every single player in there, and I mean every single coach. But just put that in context. The question is, what's your level of confidence or support in Steve Wilks? And Kyle Shanahan doesn't say what his level of confidence or support in Steve Wilks is. Sometimes what the coach doesn't say is actually the most powerful part of the answer. He closes the answer by saying, I mean, every single player in there, and I mean every single coach in there needs to do better. There was another question about Steve Wilks in today's conference call. So a day later, after the emotions post game had cooled, and this is what Kyle Shanahan said. The exact question was, will he move Steve Wilks from the booth to the field? And Shanahan said, quote, "That's something that we'll discuss this week. Just the two of us. If that's something that he thinks would help him, we'll definitely try." First off, I mean, the second part of that answer, if that's something that he thinks would help him, it's not. I mean, it doesn't inspire a lot of confidence in Shanahan's belief right here that everything's on the right track. And again, he had another chance today to firmly espouse confidence in Steve Wilks, and he didn't. But what really stands out to me is the just the two of us talk. He emphasized that this conversation with Steve Wilks is just going to be the two of them talking this week, which, I mean, I think anybody with a brain that's watching this can infer that this is going to be a hard conversation for the 49ers. They need to figure out what's wrong with the defense. Kyle Shanahan needs to say, and he will say, he's going to audit this defense over the bye week. And he's going to look and see, okay, what exactly is going wrong with these coverage combinations to lead us to the point where Joe Burrow has completed 19 passes in a row on this defense. This shouldn't happen in the NFL. What's happening so that the 49ers can have close to 20 pressures yesterday, yet still give up those 19 straight completions, still give up 28 out of 32 passes, completions to the opposing quarterback? Because again, that should not happen in the NFL, especially when the pass rush was indeed getting some push for the 49ers. And then, why isn't the pass rush? Why doesn't it have enough time to get home? The answers to these questions are obviously all interrelated, but the 49ers sack numbers are way down. By Wilks' own admission, they're way down because the coverage hasn't been tight enough. That's what he said last week. Well, obviously that did not get tightened up against the Cincinnati Bengals. So the 49ers and Shanahan, now that they have a chance to circle the wagons over the course of this bye week, need to sit down and look themselves in the mirror and say, is this working? And the reason that this is uncharted territory for the 49ers isn't because they have a new defensive coordinator. They moved from Robert Saleh to DeMeco Ryans in the past, and they had some growing pains there. And I've talked about those, and I said it's important that we give Steve Wilks some time to evaluate him, right? Because obviously any new defensive coordinator coming into a system, there's going to be some adjustment period with the new personnel. But it is important to emphasize that Wilks is the first outside coordinator that Shanahan has hired. DeMeco Ryans was already on staff when he was promoted to defensive coordinator in 2021 after Robert Saleh took the head job with the New York Jets. Steve Wilks wasn't on staff, and he's got a long, extensive history as a DB coach, defensive coordinator. He's done some head coaching in the National Football League as well. So it was a break from 49ers defensive tradition. In the past, they had a linebacker mind in that DC chair, right? DeMeco Ryans looked at the game through the lens of a linebacker. We know that the engine of this defense has been rush over coverage. That means defensive line. So the 49ers wanted Chris Kasarik to stay aboard. In fact, they wanted their whole staff, that they were able to keep, the staff that wasn't poached by D'Amico Ryans leaving to Houston. They wanted to keep the staff. And they dictated the terms to Steve Wilks when they hired him. You can't bring your own staff. We want you to integrate with what we already have here. So there was a clear desire for the 49ers to maintain what was already working on their end. But at the same time, there was also a desire by hiring somebody like Steve Wilks, a DB mind, to bring new ideas into the building. So, it's really interesting because I wrote about this back in May. We hadn't seen anything like this with the 49ers before. And it involved the crash course that Steve Wilks had to take to learn the 49ers defense. And this was the article that I wrote back on May 17th. It was a gamble that Kyle Shanahan had learned from his dad's coaching experience. In 1992, the 49ers hired Mike Shanahan to be their offensive coordinator. Mike Shanahan flew across country and joined a very robust, powerful, and respected 49ers system that obviously had originated under Bill Walsh. George Seifert was the head coach by 1992. Walsh was no longer the head man, but the 49ers were still trying to perpetuate what Walsh had established. And what they wanted out of Mike Shanahan was a coach who would bring new ideas to the offense, but at the same time respect what the 49ers already had in place. So the way that Kyle told this story, and the link to this story that I wrote in May, which gives you the background of this thought process, is linked in the description. The way that Kyle told this story was that they essentially locked Mike Shanahan in a room, not literally, but they said, hey, fly out here without your family. We want you here over the spring before the season starts to just immerse yourself in videotape. Immerse yourself in the way that we do things in this facility. Immerse yourself in tape of our games and learn our system inside and out so that when you're the offensive coordinator, you are fluent in this language, but then you could sprinkle your own contributions in. So when the 49ers hired Steve Wilks this offseason, Kyle Shanahan essentially told Wilks the same thing that George Seifert told Mike Shanahan back in 1992. Now, in 1992, 1993, and 1994, when Mike Shanahan was the 49ers offensive coordinator, it worked really damn well. Steve Young won the NFL MVP right off the bat working with Mike Shanahan in 1992. Then the 49ers won the Super Bowl, and Young won the MVP of both the Super Bowl and the regular season in 1994. And then Mike Shanahan went on to be the head coach of the Denver Broncos. So Kyle Shanahan had experience in his own family of this already working. He felt that his current 49ers had a very strong organizational structure that would be able to absorb Steve Wilks and his new ideas, and the 49ers defense, maybe they could get even better. It was already the number one defense, but they thought they could get even better because Steve Wilks, this DB mind, would be able to bring in new exotic coverage combinations to tie in with what Chris Kasarik was running up front. So that was the gamble that the 49ers took. Now we sit here in the bye week. The 49ers are 8 games in, so they'll next be on the field in week 10, and we're looking at a defense that's ranked number 10 in EPA per play and a run defense that is ranked number 26 the year after it was ranked number 2. The defense also, for all we know, is healthy. I don't know of any major injuries. Maybe somebody's hiding something. Dre Greenlaw obviously is currently dealing with the shoulder sprain, and he looked like he might have been a little bit hobbled yesterday. But for the most part, this unit has skated by injury-wise much cleaner than the offense. And it's undoubtedly underperforming compared to years prior. So this is where the comments from Shanahan about needing to talk to Wilks about whether he's going to be in the booth or on the field come from. This is where Shanahan's 2 answers, neither of which expressed much confidence in Steve Wilks, even though Shanahan had a chance to give it, come from. This is just a reflection of reality. The 49ers took a gamble, and right now the defense has seen the performance slide. Richard Sherman's take today, I think, will catch attention in the 49ers facility because Richard Sherman was very respected. He was a coach on the field when he was with the 49ers. And if Richard Sherman is saying, hey, I'm watching this and they're running different coverages, and obviously these coverages aren't working because Joe Burrow completed 19 passes in a row and this secondary has got lit up and There are too many games and stunts going on the pass rush. They just need to simplify things and rely on their talent. Let this Ferrari roar. If Richard Sherman is the one saying that, it's got to catch the 49ers' attention. It's got to catch Kyle Shanahan's attention. So, an audit is needed. Is the next step Kyle Shanahan sitting in on some defensive prep here over the course of the bye week? Maybe it is. As the CEO of this football team, it's Kyle Shanahan's job to make sure that this transition, which we know was a risky one, it was a gamble, the crash course on the 49ers defense, it's his job to make sure this goes as seamlessly as possible. You can't just zero in on the offense. So he said he's going to be having that conversation with Steve Wilks this week. It might include a question, hey, would you rather be down on the field or up in the booth? But Wilks has previously said, I want to be up in the booth. I think that's a lot of that is overblown. I think the professional athletes need to bring their own energy, and they've got Chris Kasarik down on the field. If Wilks likes to scheme it up better from upstairs because he wants to see the DBs, so be it. But the scheme has to be effective. And so far, over the past 2 weeks, especially, the scheme on the back end, way too many open receivers, has not been effective. I think it's been an issue of really discovering an identity for the 49ers. Sometimes you'll talk to the DBs and they'll be like, oh, yeah, we're really happy that he let us play more man. But then Richard Sherman says, well, this man coverage is not pairing well. It's not marrying up with the pass rush. And the results speak for themselves. Number 2 to number 26 in run defense. That obviously doesn't have as much to do with the coverage, but maybe in a little way it does, because if you can't stop the run, you can't have any fun on pass defense. But that dropped to number 30 over the past 2 weeks, despite fielding a healthy squad, unlike last season when they were beaten up in Atlanta in week 6, is definitely very, very concerning. So this is something that we're going to watch intently, but I figured you need to know this background. You need to be smart. You need to be intelligent about the background. I'm not going to be sitting here saying that the 49ers absolutely need to fire somebody because I don't have all the information. I'm not going to pretend like I have all the information about what's going on behind the scenes schematically, what Kyle Shanahan wants, but I can relay to you what Shanahan has said about Steve Wilks. And I've noticed that there hasn't been this loud boasting confidence in Steve Wilks broadcast from Kyle Shanahan. And I could also relay to you why Kyle Shanahan thought that it'd be a good idea to bring an outsider in. And maybe the situation continues to blow up in his face. Maybe the 49ers turn it around. Shanahan has to evaluate that over the course of this bye week. And that's why we saw a comment that was like this one. That's something that we'll discuss this week, just the two of us. If that's something that he thinks would help him, we'll definitely try. I'll definitely say this. The 49ers need to improve the run defense. Nothing will improve defensively unless the run defense gets better for the 49ers. That is the platform from which they operate. Now, Richard Sherman said that it looks like they're running different games and stunts up front as opposed to just straight pass rush, which is what the 49ers have been known for. It's coming straight downhill at you, and he thinks that might have slowed down the defensive line. I don't know how much hand I don't know how much hand Steve Wilks has as opposed to Chris Kasarik in some of that stuff. So it's one of those things that I was under the impression that Chris Kasarik was going to maintain autonomy over what the defensive line did, while Steve Wilks was going to implement all the coverage combinations. But the thing is, you have to marry those two together, right? Rush is going to fuel coverage. Coverage is going to fuel rush. And so maybe Steve Wilks, to marry those two together, has moved into the defensive line room to help with some of those schematics. And maybe that's why it looks different to Richard Sherman. At this point, obviously, I'm just speculating. Those are probably questions that we'll get some answers to here over the next couple of weeks now that it's coming under growing scrutiny. Obviously, everything seemed fine over the first 5 weeks, but I would venture to say that it wasn't completely fine. And this is why back in week 2, I was saying that the 49ers were already dropping in run defense. And I think that the cracks might have been hidden by the fact that the 49ers offense was so damn explosive for the first 5 weeks. But as soon as the games have gotten close, we've seen the 49ers struggle defensively, because if the run defense isn't great, you can't control a football game. The other team is controlling the high ground if they have the run game. That's how the 49ers have beaten the crap out of teams over the past several years whenever they're adhering to their winning formula. They run the football effectively, and that run game that successful run game becomes the spine of the 49ers offense. That spine of the offense is then, if they have control of it over it, they can run what they want offensively. Everything is downhill. It wasn't downhill yesterday. It wasn't downhill over the past 3 games to the 49ers because they didn't run the football. But if you look at it the other way, other teams have run the football, so they have controlled game flow. It's really hard to control game flow through just the air. You still have to run the football in the NFL, and that's why it's such a big deal that the 49ers defense has struggled against the run. No coincidence they've struggled against the run and lost the past 3 games. All right, so, one other thing I have to add is that the 49ers, they're in a little bit of between a rock and a hard place here with Steve Wilks. They really want this to work because they don't have another experienced defensive coordinator option on the current training staff. Corey Undlin, the cornerbacks coach last year, had some play calling experience, but Corey Undlin went to Houston. The 49ers didn't renew his contract. He went to Houston under DeMeco Ryans. So now, you've seen a brain drain, and the brain drain is real, right? First, Robert Saleh leaves. You were grooming DeMeco Ryans to be that next defensive coordinator. Well, now that DeMeco Ryans is gone, he's now a head coach because he did a really good job for the 49ers. So the only options outside of Ryans before Corey Undlin left was Corey Undlin. You've got other coaches that you really like that you're developing, like Daniel Bullocks, who's now been promoted to the defensive backs coach. Like maybe you look there. Johnny Holland has been a longtime linebackers coach, kind of just like Chris Kasarik has been a longtime defensive line coach. Those are probably position-specific guys, right? Those guys want to stay in their niche, in their position, especially Chris Kasarik. We know that he just wants to be that D-line coach. That's his love. That's his passion. So you'd have to bring in some kind of outside consultant, I think, to get another set of play calling eyes and ears, unless Kyle Shanahan fully involves himself in what the defense is doing. But he's already the offensive coordinator for this football team. So the 49ers don't have a lot of logical places to go as far as Steve Wilks goes. And they always knew that this season would be a growing pain because on the defensive side. That's something that the 49ers have talked about for a while. Even before week 1, they said, we don't think that we're going to be the defense that we are in the stretch run and into the playoffs in weeks 1 through 8. They openly said that. This was even before the struggles, even in weeks 2, 3, and 4. They thought that it was going to take some time. And you have a new coach, entirely new players, learning new skill sets, trying to implement what he thinks is best. It's a big undertaking. That's why Kyle Shanahan had Steve Wilks show up in the offseason and undergo this crash course. Wilks did not bring in any of his own assistants to the 49ers. Wilks has had to learn the 49ers way of doing things. So it does make sense that there is a growing period, but the problem is the 49ers cannot have that growing period included drop to number 30 in total defense. That's unacceptable. They can't have it feel the drop from number 2 to number 26 in run defense. That's been unacceptable. It's not good enough for a team that's not only contending, but fighting for a 1 seed, because these defensive lapses have now cost them 2 games. The defense has been the primary portion of the 49ers team to blame for the past 2 losses. That's indisputable. In fact, there are, out of the 49ers 8 games they played this year, when you look at the expected points added, whether it's in the positive or the negative of the offense and the defense, there's only been 1 out of 8 games in which the offense has not delivered positive EPA in a game. And that was the Cleveland game. So against Minnesota, even though that was a loss, against Cincinnati, even though that was a loss, the 49ers offense was in the positive. But the 49ers defense has been in the negative, so a below average performance in 4 of the 49ers' 8 games. Against the Rams, when we thought the coverage was too soft. Against the Cardinals, where the Cardinals were able to run the ball very effectively against the 49ers. And then against Minnesota and Cincinnati, where the 49ers got completely lit up through the air. And, they gave up a lot of big plays through the air, I thought, to the Arizona Cardinals as well earlier this season. So, yes, the defense has sputtered objectively. You can't argue that it hasn't. The offense has driven this team so far. That's been a departure from the past, but that would have been acceptable for the 49ers had it been, just a little bit of a slip and the offense could be the locomotive that pulls the train, that's all great. But if the defense can just, stay in the top 5, top 6 for now, we'll be good. But over the past 2 games, again, the 49ers defense has fallen to number 30. So the 49ers are here saying, wait, we're not good. We're in a situation where this defense is at the bottom barrel level and they can't do anything right. Everything that Cincinnati ran in this game, the 49ers weren't ready for. And I think that they were already talking about going back to more vanilla, basic coverage schemes after the week before some of the more exotic stuff against Minnesota had gotten burned. So if Kirk Cousins is able to do this, if Joe Burrow is able to do this, you can be sure that the rest of the quarterbacks on the 49ers schedule are going to be taking notes. The rest of the play callers are going to be taking notes about the potential weaknesses in this 49ers defense, which is why Shanahan and Wilks have to sit down, figure out if this partnership is going to work. This is the adversity that you sign up for in the National Football League. Great scheme, great players on the other side. And the 49ers took a big gamble when they hired Steve Wilks. It's a gamble that paid off when they hired Mike Shanahan. They brought in an outsider in Wilks. And so far, defensive efficiency has clearly dropped, especially after the tough past 2 games. So this is a moment of truth for sure for the 49ers over the bye week. All right, I'm going to open it up to Q&A. It'd be really cool if everybody checked out this article inside Steve Wilks' Crash Course. I think it would make you a more educated football fan if you haven't seen it yet. So you can subscribe to The Athletic. It is available in the description. A lot of comments today. If you have any good questions, I will answer them. Then I'm on a red-eye flight tonight. Great. Mike Shanahan was a great coach. Mike Shanahan, I think, someday should be in the Hall of Fame. I mean, Mike won 2 Super Bowls with Denver, won a third, so his first Super Bowl, but a third trophy came with the 49ers as the offensive coordinator in 94. If you go to Shanahan Steakhouse in Denver, they have 3 Super Bowl trophies in the display case, and one of them is the 49ers 1994 Lombardi Trophy. How was my sandwich today? It was really good. Got the pastrami from Reyes on Valencia. And let's talk about some of somebody's asking about Isaiah Oliver right here. A lot of questions about Oliver. He's really struggled in coverage. That's true. The 49ers can get better at certain spots of this defense, which is what we're going to keep an eye on here before the trade deadline at 1 p.m. Pacific time tomorrow. Isaiah Oliver gave up a ton in coverage. The change of direction, I mean, that was a concern back to training camp, right? When the 49ers were like, oh boy, this guy might not be able to cover as well as we thought. We better move Diamond Lenore inside. And then they wanted to play matchups with Isaiah Oliver. And then it seems to have proven too difficult to play that matchup-based defense with him. So they're now in a position where the Bengals were really picking on him, but Isaiah Oliver is good at a glorified linebacker type of role near the line of scrimmage. He had 3 tackles for loss yesterday. Bottom line is the 49ers, I think, are really interested in Jalen Johnson, I would assume, from the Chicago Bears, because he's having a career year as a cover corner. And if you picked up somebody like Jalen Johnson, another effective cover corner, it allows Diamond Lenore to move inside, and you get more shiftiness in the slot, and that's something that could give Steve Wilks more options on the back end. Would it solve the coverage combination issues the 49ers are having? Not necessarily, but it'd make it easier to solve. And, this is the kind of stuff that the staff needs to communicate about. Shanahan needs to figure out exactly what's wrong. Lynch needs to figure out exactly what's wrong. And they need to figure out, okay, do we need more pieces to help Steve Wilks realize his vision? Because they thought that some growing pains would happen, but they thought they would also be able to peak at the right time under Steve Wilks with a new and improved secondary, more complex coverage combinations that would marry up and pair very well with the front four. It's interesting, anytime over the first few months of his employment as the 49ers defensive coordinator, when Steve Wilks was asked, what's most important in this job, what are you focusing on? He'd always start with the pass rush, because that's what the 49ers philosophy is. I think that's what the crash course emphasized to him. This team is rooted in rush over coverage. And that might have been a new philosophy for him being a DB oriented guy. But anyway, maybe the 49ers get a new cover guy in Jalen Johnson. Maybe somebody like Montez Sweat, who's a top 10 edge setter against the run, helps the defense fix this slippage. It's the run defense slippage that has me, most convinced this is a systemic issue under Steve Wilks, because it's just such a crazy drop off from where the 49ers have been over the past 2 years with very similar personnel. You can't convince me that Sansom Ebukam and Charles Amenahu are so irreplaceable that an NFL team without them drops from the best run defense in the league all the way down to near the bottom at number 26. That's a really tough sell, right? It's more likely has something to do with schematics. Kyle Shanahan had said it had something to do with fatigue this past week, and that's fair. I mean, the 49ers were coming off of a short week. That's why you don't want to make impulsive decisions based on just one game. But we have more than 3 games and, three glaring games, but more than 3 games of data showing that the 49ers run defense is not what it once was. And if you don't control that backbone, your pass rush is probably not going to be as good. And it's much more likely to be a tough situation on defense without controlling that line of scrimmage. That's what football always comes down to. All right, more questions. I'm ready for them. The D line, I don't think they're firing off the ball the way that they used to. I think Richard Sherman said that today. I think the 49ers are running a lot of techniques up front instead of the standard wide 9. Just go for it. And at the same time, they're still not defending the screen pass as well. So they're getting the worst of both worlds, right? Doesn't seem like they're firing off the ball with the same vigor and the same intensity as the past, and they're still giving up a lot on the screens. I mean, it has been a complete mess over the last 2 weeks defensively. There are no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Somebody talking about offensive line help. I think that's something the 49ers need to focus on as well, because they lost on both lines of scrimmage against the Cincinnati Bengals. The offensive line was struggling. The defensive line was struggling. If you lose on both lines of scrimmage, well, the 49ers, I mean, if you look, I tweeted this actually not too long ago. Let me open the summary the 49ers are at right now. 49ers are in the bottom third if you look at advanced metrics of pass protection, 1, run defense, 2, and run blocking, 3, at least without Trent Williams. So their problem is definitely not the quarterback, Brock Purdy, who still has the number 3 QBR in all of football, despite the fact that all of those things are working against him. It's as simple as 49ers are losing at the line of scrimmage. Maybe that's tougher for people to accept because it's harder to turn around, but, so much of this blame is heading in Brock Purdy's direction. And yeah, he deserves, I mean, a little criticism. I get it. He threw 2 interceptions in the 3rd and the 4th quarter, but this defense has been making dozens of mistakes every week, and the defense isn't a 23-year-old quarterback being paid $900,000 a year. This is a high-priced all-pro defense that is not performing up to its old standard with new leadership this year. And that's why this is such a big question. That's why Kyle Shanahan's words are being so scrutinized right now. He talked about the meeting with Steve Wilks when they have a discussion this week. And yesterday, he talked about both sides of the football when asked about his level of support or confidence in Steve Wilks. Really, really fascinating stuff. I'm opening up questions on anything right now. If there's a good one, I will answer it. Richard Sherman's comments today were definitely interesting. Chris Kocurek is happy a defensive line coach. Chris Kocurek, I don't think, wants to be a defensive coordinator. Now people want Richard Sherman to be the 49ers defensive coordinator. I am done with 75 hard, yeah, finished 75 hard right on Pittsburgh weekend, right at week 1 of the regular season. That's a good question here from Frank Tom Ocean. Jacob Anthony says, "It's obvious the 49ers are going to have to live with Wilks. What other option do they have?" Well, I already addressed that. I don't think they have any. They would have to bring in some kind of defensive consultant. They'd have to hire Richard Sherman away from his TV job. Yeah, and who knows if Richard Sherman even wants to coach. I think Richard Sherman is liking working in the media right now. It's a tough situation for the 49ers. I do think that you could take other measures, and I think they are. I think that Kyle Shanahan indicated that the 49ers are to make sure that they can right this ship. And one of them could be after he discusses what the next steps are with Steve Wilks. Based on this quote, he said, let's get it up here. He said, "That's something that we'll discuss this week, just the 2 of us. If that's something that he thinks would help him, we'll definitely try." That was Shanahan's quote about Wilks potentially coaching from the booth. So it sounds to me like they're gonna discuss, and they should, and they probably do this on a weekly basis. They should discuss what went wrong and what they can do better moving forward. And if it's gotten to the point where Shanahan is so exasperated and the 49ers really need a turnaround now defensively, maybe Shanahan sits in on some of those planning meetings. I don't know. That's speculation, but I think Shanahan has discussed it. Um, just the situation in general, just the conversations that he's gonna have with Steve Wilks, and he has not ruled anything out, even Steve Wilks moving down and coaching from the field. Although, again, I think a lot of that's probably a little overblown. I know Tim Ryan actually came on the radio this morning and said that he thinks there might be a little bit lost in translation if Wilks moves down there. But we are really trying to pick through stuff with a fine tooth comb right now. What needs to happen is the 49ers, from a game planning standpoint during the week, need to make sure that they're ready to run coverages that aren't giving quarterbacks instant releases. You've got to make opposing QBs hold at least a couple of hitches. All right, it was a good day today. A lot of news that we passed down. Aaron Banks, the 49ers left guard. That's not good news, by the way, for the 49ers. He's got a turf toe. He's going to miss a few weeks. John Feliciano moving over into the 49ers left guard spot after the bye. Trey Greenlaw day to day with the shoulder sprain. It's your 49ers update. Kyle Shanahan today. Uh, Obviously gave the update on Steve Wilks when he discussed what I put up on the screen a little bit ago, but he noted the 49ers were really, really tired, and I could leave you with this. Shanahan said that he saw a slow and tired team, so he obviously hopes that the 49ers are gonna come out with much higher energy level next week after the bye week against the Jacksonville Jaguars. He, by extension, I think, believes that the 49ers missed tackle issue will resolve itself with freshness. But I think there's something a little extra into the missed tackle issue, and I'll explain it here to close. The 49ers have missed 32 tackles over the past 3 weeks. Over the prior 3 weeks, before this 3 games losing streak where they missed 32 tackles, they missed only 9 combined tackles. Obviously, the final week here, you could use fatigue where they missed 13 tackles against the Bengals as a reason or an excuse or whatever you wanna call it, because they were playing on a short week. The Bengals were fresh. But what about the high missed tackle rate against the Cleveland Browns? What about the high missed tackle rate against the Minnesota Vikings? To me, these are the first truly close games the 49ers are playing, and players who are thinking too much, who aren't fully embracing what's going on because it's still swimming in their heads, those are the guys that are most likely to miss tackles. Again, the 49ers could cover up deficiencies because they were so explosive offensively over the first 5 weeks of the season. So a lot of people say, "Well, the defense was fine in week 1 to 5." Yes, but stuff is a lot closer to not being fine in the NFL than you might realize. And by extension, on the flip side of that, stuff is a lot closer to being fine than you might realize when it looks bad, right? It's never as bad as it looks or never as good as it looks in the NFL. I think that's an added work for this league. But either way, 49ers have to figure out what is making this not fine in this current situation because these rankings are definitely not going to be enough for the 49ers if they wanna plow through the playoffs and on to the Super Bowl. Midstream adjustment. We'll see what Kyle Shanahan and Steve Wilks talk about this week. Everybody, thanks for watching. It was a fun show. I will talk to you all very